Number 1.
On the night of May 31st, 1902, Pensenhall, Suffolk, England was dealing with a dark and stormy night. It was remembered as a particularly bad storm. On the morning of June 1st, 1902, 22-year-old Rose Ann Harsent's father came to visit her at her home in the Providence House. He found her lying on the ground in her kitchen with her throat slit. It was initially thought of being a suicide until it was found that Rose was 6 months pregnant, and a closer look at the scene. It was believed that she was killed around 1 to 6 a.m. She had been attacked in her chest and throat stabbed, and her arms showed signs of defensive wounds. It seemed that the murderer failed to burn her, and the home as her arm had been burnt, her nightgown had been partially burned, and there was a newspaper under her head that had burnt edges. Paraffin from a broken lamp was used to try to start the fire, and a medicine bottle was smashed and left at the scene. It seemed like she hadn't slept in her bed that night. No one had known that Rose was pregnant. It seemed as if she had tried to induce a miscarriage at one point, but it failed. She then kept her pregnancy a secret and never revealed who the father was. There was a letter found in her home. "Dear Rose, I will try to see you tonight at 12 o'clock at your place. If you put a light in your window at 10 o'clock for about 10 minutes, then you can take it out again. Don't have a light in your room at 12 o'clock as I will come round to the back." It's believed that whoever sent this letter may have been the killer. William Gardiner became the main suspect soon. The locals knew he was having an affair with her in 1901. It was assumed that the baby may have been Gardiner's. There was other evidence that seemed to point towards him also, such as boot prints in the wet ground seemed to have matched a pair of his boots. A handwriting expert stated that the letter was in his handwriting and that the paper came from his workplace. The smashed medicine bottle was also. William denied all of this. He also had spent a lot of time that early morning with his wife and another neighbor with visiting. But he lived in the eyesight of Rose's home and wouldn't have taken much time to get there to murder her and come back. William Gardiner was arrested and tried twice, once in 1902 and 1903, but was acquitted. His trial was said to have been 11 to 1 for guilty in the first trial and 11 to 1 for not guilty for the second. Was the murderer was acquitted of his crime? Maybe the real murderer was someone no one suspected, due to the main focus being on William. Some speculate that William's wife was the perpetrator of the crime and her motive was because she was jealous. But the world will never truly know what had happened that stormy morning.
Number 2.
It's been 53 years since someone stabbed, beat and shot Rose Busch in her mid-century modern home in Sequoia Hills. No one ever was charged. It's doubtful anyone ever will be. The passage of time is a cruel thing. Memories dim, photos fade, people pass. Justice too can slip away. 53 years ago, someone managed to talk their way into the Sequoia Hills home of 68-year-old Rose Busch, stab her 8 to 10 times with a paring knife, hit her over the head and fire at least one shot from a .22 caliber pistol at her. Then, the killer fled, apparently tossing a police officer's uniform, bloody gloves, a broken silencer, and the pistol at various spots in the leafy, affluent West Knoxville neighborhood. The blade of the paring knife remained in Rose's chest. The wife of a wealthy Knoxville jeweler, she died on the hallway floor. Husband Harry Busch found her after coming home from work. No one's ever been charged. It's likely no one ever will be. Almost every investigator, every witness, every family member in the case is dead. It's one of Knoxville's biggest unsolved crimes. It was almost certainly an arranged killing. As every year advances, the chances of solving it shrink. Time and funerals have erased a lot of the pieces of this puzzle, said retired News Sentinel reporter Jim Balich, who wrote the definitive story about the killings in 2008 to mark the 40th anniversary. The childless victim lies by herself today in a plot meant for 2 off Keith Avenue. The mid-century modern house where she was murdered, meanwhile, is about to be destroyed. In the Busch home at 1026 Kennesaw Avenue, nothing appeared out of place the late afternoon of Tuesday, November 19, 1968. It was unseasonably cold that day, in the upper 30s. Richard Nixon had just been elected president the week before. Thanksgiving was coming the following week. Rose was icing a cake in the kitchen. Harry, a millionaire and jeweler who ran United Loan Pawn Shop on Gay Street, would be heading home soon. The maid finished up about 4 p.m. The gardener left about an hour later. Rose had the darkening, one-story house to herself. Harry Busch would later recall telephoning his wife around 5:25 p.m. to let her know he was heading home from downtown. A cautious woman, the Poland native, who had immigrated to the United States as a child, typically kept the house locked. On this day, however, someone was able to get inside, perhaps fooling Rose by wearing a police officer's disguise. They entered through the carport and, police theorized, quickly turned on Rose, who'd been busy in the nearby kitchen with the cake. Someone hit her in the head with the pistol. At least one shot went off. It's thought the attacker then grabbed a paring knife with white tape on the handle from the kitchen, Balich said. The killer stabbed Rose again and again until the blade broke off in her chest. Harry Busch found her lying dead on her back on the hallway floor when he got home about 6:10 p.m. They'd been married 44 years. The only thing missing appeared to be her wedding ring. For Harry, the trip home had been anything but routine. As he prepared to leave his store, an employee alerted him that one of his car tires was flat, Balich recalled. Harry Busch caught a ride with the employee to a nearby garage so someone could fix the flat. They then headed on to the house, where Harry discovered his dead wife. Soon Knoxville Police Department officers swarmed the scene. The TBI eventually joined the case. Bill Allen, an Oak Ridge attorney, was a young journalist fresh out of the University of Tennessee at the time. He covered crime for the News Sentinel, then an afternoon paper. Because of the paper's early deadlines, Allen arrived at the crime scene early November 20. He drove over to the Busch house and walked right in. Times were different back then. At that time, they didn't have police tape all over the place, sir, and keep reporters out of the scene very often, Allen recalled to 10 News. The body had been taken at that time. There was blood all over the place. I think the cake was probably still there. In the hours and days that followed, the slaying would become more and more curious. City workers would find the pistol, the bent silencer, the policeman's uniform, and the bloody gloves along area roads, as if tossed from a car. The uniform was an old one from the Cleveland, Ohio, Police Department. Authorities also traced the gun to Ohio. Anytime a spouse is killed, the maid is always among the first to be scrutinized by police. KPD looked hard at Harry. They learned interesting information, such as the fact that he'd been carrying on with a notorious Knoxville playgirl named Hazel Davidson. But Harry passed a polygraph exam. Back 50 years ago, that device still carried weight in a criminal investigation. Today they're no longer used. Allen remembered Harry Busch. He'd gone into his pawn shop looking for a guitar. Later, he and other reporters learned that Harry and Hazel had been seeing each other. He had the greatest excuse in the world for not being anywhere near the scene at the time, Allen said. I remember that part of it being unusual. They were never able to pin it on him. Davidson claimed she knew nothing about the killing. Police theories persisted that she may in fact have hired someone to kill Rose so she could have Harry to herself. Or perhaps Harry had hired someone for the killing and arranged an alibi to draw attention away from himself. Weeks passed, then months. Police got no tangible break. No charges were filed. Harry Busch, originally from Connecticut, left Knoxville and moved to Miami. In 1969, he married Sadie Tisch, the very wealthy mother of Lawrence Tisch, who ended up running CBS Incorporated and helping his brother, Preston Tisch, run the family's Lowe's Corporation hotel group. Hazel Davidson also later moved to Florida, although Balich said he couldn't verify that she and Busch resumed their relationship. After Sadie died in 1990, Harry Busch married yet again in South Florida. He died in June 2002 at age 103 in Miami Beach. If Rose Busch were killed today, Balich said, police would have a lot more to work with, such as DNA testing and sophisticated forensics analyses, to solve the crime. 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. The retired reporter said, when he began investigating the case 10 years ago for a 40th anniversary retrospective, KPD told him it appeared the police file was gone. Lead investigator Bob Chadwell eventually moved away to Virginia and then died. Davidson ended up back in East Tennessee, dying in 1999 at age 75 in Jefferson City. At her death she was considered Knoxville's most notorious madam. What do I believe happened? Ballach mused. Based on the pieces of the puzzle we have in place and keeping in mind the many pieces missing of this puzzle, these pieces point more to Hazel Davidson being behind this case than Harry Busch being behind this case. There's no proof that either was involved. Rose Busch lies in New Jewish Cemetery in a plot by herself, the marker next to hers left blank. It's where Harry would have been if he hadn't left for Florida. Today, few people except longtime Knoxvillians and curious journalists know about the Rose Busch killing.
Number 3.
A Quebec mother, who was seeking closure in her toddler daughter's disappearance 43 years ago, was left devastated Friday after an excavation search proved fruitless. Ann Cyr had been quietly confident that the targeted search would provide answers to the mystery of what happened to her 18-month-old daughter Yohanna in 1978. Those hopes were dashed when Montreal police emerged from digging up parts of a parking lot to say they had found nothing. Cyr had left Yohanna in the care of a boyfriend for 1 week while taking a job outside Montreal. Her daughter was declared missing on August 15, 1978. The boyfriend eventually told Cyr the girl had drowned in the bathtub and that he'd buried the body. The corpse was never recovered, and charges against the suspect were stayed due to a lack of evidence. Yohanna's case was reopened several years ago, and police were acting on a tip that a neighbor reported seeing a man matching the boyfriend's description carrying a metal box toward a vacant lot in the city's Street Laurent borough. The area was developed and now houses a municipal recreation center and parking lot. On Friday, police dug in 2 specific spots identified by engineering students who used sophisticated tracking equipment earlier this year to trace metal in the lot. The lead detectives said they were looking for a metal box about the size of a bread container they believed might contain the girl's remains. I feel very sad for the family, Det. Sergeant Marie-Julie Duran told reporters. Even if we knew from the outset that there was a big chance we wouldn't find anything, we had to validate the information we had. Duran said Cyr's disappearance remains an active case. She began reworking it from scratch in 2011, but conceded that police have gone as far as they can without another public tip. Cyr's disappearance is one of Quebec's oldest documented missing children's cases and involves the youngest person to have vanished. The case is not closed, Duran told reporters. We would invite anyone who knows anything to come forward. Earlier on Friday, Cyr stood in the parking lot and was optimistic. She wasn't sure how she'd react if police turned up any remains. Until 3 years ago, she'd held out hope Yohanna would turn up alive. Now she wanted closure. It's got to finish, it's got to be the end, Cyr told the Canadian press before police finished their search. Find a piece of bone or something else to bury my daughter somewhere else so she can rest in peace. It has been a difficult 3+ decades with many ups and downs. At one point in 2005, authorities thought they'd found Yohanna, a woman who looked like her was living in California and searching for her birth parents. I thought that was it, Cyr said, who was disappointed when DNA results proved negative. In 2013, an age-advanced sketch of Yohanna Cyr was released. The head of the Missing Children's Network said, "It's still important the family knows what happened. It's extremely difficult for her heart is broken, it's not the response she was hoping for today," Pina Archiman said. The main suspect, the former boyfriend, an American, is still alive and refuses to cooperate with authorities. I met him 2 years ago in the United States, and he doesn't want to give information, Duran said. She said the man, now in his late 60s, was given numbers where he could remain anonymous and provide information that could lead to the body.
Number 4.
The mother of a toddler who went missing near Queenstown nearly 30 years ago is begging for people to come forward and give the family answers. Amberly Rose Cruickshank was last seen at a property in Cornwall Street, Kingston, on the shores of Lake Wakatipu on October 17, 1992. The 2-year-old and her family had been staying at the property at the time and were socializing when she went missing. On May 5 this year, she would have turned 31 years old. Police on Tuesday announced a reward of $100,000 for information or evidence which leads to the identity and conviction of those responsible for her disappearance. For Amber Lee's mother, Nikki Cruickshank, her daughter's disappearance 29 years ago is still as raw today as it was back then. On Tuesday, she made an appeal. "I'm asking you from the bottom of my heart, I'm begging you to please give us the answers we are looking for," she says. Her hopes for information were boosted. On Tuesday now police are offering a substantial reward. The reward is $100,000, and it's for any material information or evidence that will lead to the identity and conviction of a person in relation to the Amber Lee Cruickshank disappearance, says Detective Inspector Stu Harvey of the Southern District Police. Police initially suspected she'd drowned in Lake Wakatipu, but found nothing during an extensive search of the area. The inquiry to date leads us to believe that there's foul play involved in Amber Lee's disappearance, and by that what I mean is there's been somebody involved in her disappearing from Kingston that day, Dead Insp. Harvey says. Cruickshank says that they've previously asked police to offer a reward for information. $100,000 is a lot of money. Sometimes a lot of money can make people talk, she says. "I knew deep within my heart that there was no way in hell that she was in that lake unless someone had put her there." The last time police offered an award of this scale, it led to a breakthrough in the 24-year-old cold case of Angela Blackmore. Police will also consider immunity from prosecution for any accomplice who wasn't directly involved with the disappearance of Amber Lee, but can provide vital information or evidence. The reward will stand for 6 months from April 13. She deserves to come home. We deserve closure. What more can I say? Have a heart, Cruickshank says. It must be a hell of a burden to be carrying all these years, because it's been a hell of a roller coaster ride for me and my family.